We're back. Now we're going to look at the fun topic of disinterment. This is a delightful topic. Any of you who've had the privilege of being on a disinterment know that it is generally an olfactory bouquet of surprise. So in general, disinterment is also known as exhumation. It is the removal of a dead body or remains from its place of repose after disposition has been completed. So with burial, we dig it up and we remove it to some other location. With cremation, I will agree with this. Removal of cremated remains from their repository. So essentially by taking the urn out of the niche, we are doing a disinterment. Okay? In most areas of the U.S., people don't dig this. Okay? Disinterment is not looked upon very favorably. Many courts have ruled that disinterment is not a right and will not provide authorization unless there is a really dang good reason that it is necessary and in the interest of justice or public health. Even the individual paramount right of disposition cannot disinter the will or disinter the body against the will of other relatives except upon strong and very convincing evidence that persuades a court that it is required. That being said, you have to obey whatever also are the disinterment procedures for the cemetery. Okay, the cemetery. Many cases indicate that the law in principle abhors disinterment. Okay, absolutely detests it out of respect for the human desire not to have one's remains disturbed. Survivors don't generally dig this sort of stuff, catch the pun, and protection of public health. As I said, it is an olfactory bouquet, which is generally the result of all sorts of nastiness. Disinterment may be authorized by law on two principal grounds: public interest or private purpose. Public purpose may be to further some matter of public interest, although the immediate reason may be private, such as determine if the body is actually the person it's supposed to be, as a part of an investigation. Private matters are exactly that, family-only type of stuff. The public at large, the courts, they don't get involved, typically. Exhumations in the public interest usually involve disinterment of the body and reinterment in the same place. They disinter the body, they conduct whatever investigation or secondary autopsy, whatever they need to do, and it is returned to its place of rest. This is usually civil or criminal related, okay? The state has the power to seek an exhumation for gathering evidence in a trial, and this is very well established. Just like a coroner can create an inquest and force an autopsy, or a medical examiner is charged by statute to investigate and perform autopsies, people cannot interfere with that. That is something that is given power by the state, the police power of the state, to a individual to perform because of the interest of public knowledge, health, safety, whatever it might be. The same exact rule applies for disinterment. If they need to disinter someone, no matter how offensive it might be to whatever religion, the state is going to do it. Someone may try to exhume a body in regards to an alleged cause of death on a death certificate in reference to an insurance policy, which is also permissible. But if they're doing it for the civil reason, there is a much stronger burden of proof if you're going to argue it before a judge. So why would that be important? A cause of death and a death certificate and an insurance policy. Ask you that question. Why is this an issue? Let it percolate for a minute. You came up with an idea that what if that person's death was ruled a suicide rather than a homicide, or suicide rather than an accident, and the insurance company may not pay for that reason? You hit the nail right on the head. People have a vested interest that if a person died as a result of homicide, the life insurance pays out. If they took their own life, the life insurance policy may not pay out the face value, but only the amount that was paid in. In New York, your book says, a sister wanted a disinterment to determine cause of death with potential foul play, even though an autopsy was done. Didn't work so well. Judge declined permission because the foul play was based on hearsay rather than statements under oath, and there was nothing to indicate the public official had made an error in the cause of death. So now you are an attorney. The judge has just said, I decline. I do not give permission to disinter the body because all the statements were made on hearsay, and there is no indication that the pathologist who performed the autopsy made any mistakes. You, as the attorney requesting this for the family, what would you then try to look for? The first thing would be statements under oath, because that's the first thing that's here. And the second thing was any possible error that the pathologist or incompetence of the pathologist or mental state of the pathologist, a result of inebriation or whatever, so that you can try to get this done, right? Disinterments can also be made in the public interest to make way for streets, water supplies, etc. This is especially true if they think that the bodies may contaminate water sources. Whole cemeteries can be disinterred to make way for progress, for highways, for housing, for whatever. That is under a concept of eminent domain, where a jurisdiction has the right to take land. And there are certain rules regarding that we won't get into, but it's enough that you should know that eminent domain is basically what this is talking about, in addition to just public health issues. So here in Florida, Pinellas County, it's the Tampa Bay area, ordered a cemetery to disinter and then chemically treat soil due to high exposure levels of formaldehyde. And this is not case law. This is at the court. This was done by the Pinellas County, basically branch of the Environmental Protection Agency, who did soil samples and then did water testing near a prominent cemetery within the county. And it turned out that the formaldehyde in all the bodies from the 50s and 60s, because of the no vault rules and, the caskets were being eroded, normally high. So they were required to disinter and then put these caskets and whatnot into appropriate containers and then chemically treat the soil so that it would not pose a hazard to the Florida aquifer. Generally, with private purposes for disinterment, the disinterment occurs and the body is reinterred somewhere else. And there's lots and lots of reasons as to why this happens. But usually it's because the family has relocated. Body was mistakenly buried in a wrong plot or disrepair of the current cemetery. They don't like the way it looks, so they put it someplace nice. They go to visit and they find out that dad was buried in mom's spot or dad was buried in the wrong part of the cemetery. Oopsies. Okay? Disinterment is usually a statutory regulation. The usual procedure is the next of kin or legally authorized person makes a written application to the cemetery. Funeral director is usually required to be there, and generally they go to the funeral director that handled either the disinterment and then is going to handle the shipping, or the person handling the reinterment, whatever it is. It generally goes to a party that was there. That depends. Okay, but generally, the person that is involved with the transport is going to be present. In private practice, I had a unique situation with an Armenian family, Orthodox Catholic. Dad died in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, was subject to disinterment under their regulations, which is a little insane up there. For any disinterment, it requires a local court order from one of the local magistrates, i.e. judges. Then, 3 months later, he was reinterred here in Florida. I obviously was not present in Massachusetts. I corresponded with a funeral director up there, delightful firm, I can't remember the name of it, and they were able to get things done as quickly as possible. Lots of delays, lots of problems. The family actually owned a contracting company, and they provided the over-the-road transport using one of their semis that's used to haul the earth movers, bulldozers, and whatnot. And I was called to the cemetery to witness the reinterment of their father from Massachusetts. That is something special when you get to see the family again and they have a degree of satisfaction of knowing that mom and dad are together. Restrictions can be placed on disinterment for public health reasons. That makes perfect sense. And when there's no statute, case law is controlling. Whatever the court has said in the past is generally what is going to happen now. Generally, the surviving spouse, next of kin, have the power to make the request for disinterment for private purposes. One of the best kept secrets is under the regulations now is in practice, and this was back in 2012, is that at a national cemetery, if you can meet the requirement for disinterment, which is generally signatures of family, there is no cost for disinterment in a national cemetery, so that you could disinter someone from, say, a cemetery here in Florida, national cemetery here in Florida, for transport and reinterment to a national cemetery in the state of Nevada. The only cost the family pays is transport, just like anything to do with a national cemetery. So it's fairly good business practice that when you're discussing options with families and they wish to relocate and they don't know what's going to happen, that you tell them that unless something is changed, the national cemeteries will pick up disinterment and reinterment. However, the family just needs to pay for shipment. And this is extraordinarily convenient for things like urns. When determining a disinterment, each individual case must be judged its own fact, but generally the following factors are used. What is the degree of relationship to the disinterment in regards to the deceased party? What is the degree of relationship to the people that do not want this to happen to the deceased? And did the deceased say anything in a will or document, some type of maybe witnessed or notarized form that expresses their wishes? What is their conduct? What are they acting like? Are they doing this to be belligerent and annoying, to waste people's time or to offend? Or is it the other party, that everyone wants this and someone is just doing it to try to prevent it because they feel that they can? How long has this person been interred? Strength of reasons offered, that's kind of common sense. Individual arguments for and against. Integrity and compassion. A person seeking disinterment to provide a secure and comparable resting place. If you are going to disinter, are the reasons altruistic enough? So for instance, with my Orthodox Catholic family, the reason was Dad and Mom always wanted to be together, and unfortunately everyone now lived in Florida. No one was left in Massachusetts. So that is a very strong, compelling reason that they have the resources. This was very well documented they wanted to be together, and they had a very large family plot at the cemetery they were using, so it made more sense for Dad to come down here rather than everyone to go up there. Right in principles of the religious body or other institution which granted the right to inter the body at the first place of burial. Sometimes with private parties you are prevented from doing it because of religious rules. Catholic cemeteries, Jewish portion of cemeteries where disinterment within Judaism is extremely disfavored. Courts will necessarily balance. It's a court of equity. Remember, they're going to balance the competing interests. Book example says in New Jersey, a Catholic was buried in a Catholic cemetery, just not the one named in the will. The judge said, somewhat eloquently, such directions, even though contained, are not testamentary in nature, since there is no property right in dead body in the ordinary sense. What was that called? Do you remember? What type of property concept dead bodies are? Quasi-property. Good. Okay. After interment, a body is the custody of the law, and removal is subject to the jurisdiction of the court. Such power should not be exercised without, and I paraphrase, damn good reason. In light of the fact that the decedent is already buried and consecrated in hallowed ground, which a Catholic cemetery would be, and the cost incident to removal to where he should be appears excessive when compared to the amount of money in the estate, there appears no good cause or urgent necessity to direct the removal. Religious law can be taken into consideration, but it is not binding on a court. Remember, we are not a theocracy. Religious law has no bearing on a court-mandated issue. So in an Orthodox Jewish cemetery, which if you're not familiar with Judaism, that is the most strict form of Judaism that you're going to find. And I understand that there's even varying levels of Orthodox, Hasidic, etc. But for the sake of argument, we will view that as the extremely conservative right element, okay, the most proper, quote-unquote, way of doing it. An Orthodox Jewish cemetery refused to allow a disinterment based on the fact that the cemetery deed rooted in ecclesiastical law, and in this case, ecclesiastical means pertaining to the church, pertaining to a religion. It's rooted in religious law. The cemetery deed prohibited such action, even though reinterment would be in a Reformed Jewish cemetery. And Reforms have taken the Jewish faith and adapted to a more modern kind of reading. Judge said the deed was in conflict with the statutory right to request disinterment, permitted the removal on the basis that a private contract grounding in church law cannot nullify an existing statute. So look what happened there. Okay, look what happened. Unlike here, where the size of the state is small, which is really the pressing issue, right? Because we're going from Jewish cemetery to Jewish cemetery, Catholic cemetery to Catholic cemetery. Not enough money here. 1955, different kind of societal mentality. And here we are, same year, or 10 years later, 1965, and a judge is saying, well, they have a statutory right to disinter. And if they have that right, a religious deed cannot prevent it, even if they might be Jewish themselves or whatever. And obviously, if the family is a practicing Jewish family, they might run into some problems with their rabbi regarding what they are doing. But that is to be, dealt with between the family and their religious superiors. Sometimes disinterment is the result of good old-fashioned family disputes. In Tennessee. Good old boy, yeah. A widow sought to have her husband's remains taken from the in-laws' property. Oh, this already has the makings of absolute prime time made-for-TV drama. Evidence showed that the parties were always very hostile to each other. You think? It noted that the parties were Jewish and that Jewish custom did not favor disinterment, as we have previously discussed. It also recognized that the judicial principle that courts do not ordinarily permit disinterment unless there is compelling reason. It was then noted there was no record of what the preferences of the deceased were. So, the judge ruled that when it comes to the wishes of the spouse versus those of the parents, remember that common law hierarchy, okay? The spouse should command first consideration and authorize disinterment. 1974. Spouse wins. Common law hierarchy, even under most statutory hierarchies. The unfortunate truth is there is no quick and easy solution. If you are looking at a fact pattern and a problem, you simply have to try to make your best educated guess based on what we are teaching. Make sure you understand the process, especially the process and the statutes and the laws where you intend to practice and obey them and do not participate in anything naughty, okay? Make sure that you have verified and checked paperwork. Make sure you see the orders. It is an offense both in statute and common law to disinter a dead body without proper authority, regardless of the purpose or motive. Judge ruled that state commissioners were in violation to disinter remains in quote-unquote paid grave spaces that the family then built on and reinterment in the free section, poor section, of the cemetery without consent of the next of kin as directed in statute, 1897. So if you put the body in the ground, you cover it up, you are not implicitly authorized without permission to dig it back up because you didn't get payment, which is why many cemeteries won't even open the grave until they get paid. Folks, thank you for your attention.